What is our number 10? According to ChatGPT. This is interesting. I hadn't actually looked too much at this one, Justin. I was focusing on the others. Good point. Wouldn't have made my list, but again, it doesn't mean I disagree with it. I would have, if somebody presented it to me and I thought about it, it may have made my list. Number 10 is
Life's Third Act is a podcast dedicated to helping you get the most out of your retirement. Sponsored by Tucker Allen. Here's Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell.
Welcome to another episode of Life's Third Act. I think you'll find today very interesting. You've doubtlessly been following all the buzz about artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, GPT-4. Those of you who are not in the loop, maybe you don't own any streaming of any sort. Maybe you're not online, so to speak. But it's a very, very big thing right now. And I think that our lives are going to be dramatically changed as a result of what's happening with AI, artificial intelligence. I don't profess to be an authority on this subject, and that's the reason I can talk to you about it, oddly enough. I mean, if you know what I mean, when I listen to people who are immersed in the digital world and in software and whatnot, then sometimes the conversations aren't helpful because, they're just very technical. So I've read a lot on this topic, and to me it's fascinating, and I do think that those who believe that this is simply the very early stages of a new development, I think that they don't get it, that the early stages of this new development, we'll call it an invention in conventional terms, that took place probably 15 years ago, meaning this has been bubbling along, and it's been raising its head here and there in lots of different ways. So it's played a role in a lot of things, in a less visible role, but a role in a lot of things for the past 15, 20 years. So really we're at the point where this thing that's been around and progressing steadily for 1.5 to 2 decades is now suddenly, I think, hit the inflection point. So some people believe that this sudden flurry of interest in this subject is simply way back here at the early stages. So it's not going to have any meaningful impact on our lives for another, 10 plus years. That's typically the case. But my argument is, and other authorities are of this opinion, that when you see this sudden flurry of activity, in this case, it's actually an inflection point. So it's actually the point where suddenly, on a curve, there's this, sharp turn upward. And that's the way things that progress exponentially, that's the pattern. If you looked at them on a sheet in which it's graphed, then you see a pattern where the line moves up almost imperceptibly in the early stages, and then all of a sudden, the way that the math works, it suddenly turns up steeply. So it's like an inflection point. And very rapidly, it becomes virtually vertical. So that happens with things that are digital especially, but we've seen it in other things in human history. So this, I think, is going to be way up there among the most important things that have happened in human history. I think that the question becomes, how will it most directly impact our lives? And I think that's a little harder to say at this point. There's lots of discussion about careers that will be rendered obsolete almost, or at least the people doing those jobs are suddenly unemployed. That's a better way to put it. Those tasks, many of the tasks will still be around. It's just that they'll be done more effectively with software that is overseen by a human being. But you don't require the same number of human beings, to monitor the software that you did when you didn't have the software. So there's always some residual employment, almost virtually. Rarely do you see entire professions just virtually disappear. Usually the impact of technology has been that you see a pretty dramatic reduction in the number of people over time in some professions. And I think that's what we'll see. But for our purposes, we talk on this show about life's third act. We talk about how to assure that this last third of our life is our best, that our financial needs are met, that we're healthy, that we can plan for those we care about. We can plan for our own emergencies and contingencies. So for us, I think that it'll impact us in a lot of ways that some of us won't experience for probably a few years, but I think definitely in a few years. I don't think we're talking about a decade. So since we're not in the job market, I'll make that assumption about you. I'll assume that you're not in the job market or you don't plan to be. That's probably a safer assumption, that even if you are now, you don't plan to be for very long. So if that's the case, then this is a matter of interest to us, but it's not the sort of critical interest that we would have if we were 25 years old and planning our careers. Certainly our grandchildren and our children should be far more concerned perhaps about this than we will have to be. So our concern in a way is through them and is for them. So what we did today, an interesting way to create a show that I think you'll enjoy and that'll be helpful to you, is Justin and I. Justin is our ever-ready, creative sound guy. And how do we categorize you, Justin?
Creative producer.
Producer, okay, a producer. Does that means probably that your job description would command higher compensation? Maybe we go with sound guy.
I won't complain.
Okay. Anyway, but you're the one who went online and searched this, right?
Correct. Yep.
So
we got some interesting feedback from our chat.
Okay, so here, what we decided to do is ask a question that wouldn't be frivolous, a question that we really want to know what ChatGPT, this artificial intelligence, that the emphasis is on the word intelligence. So it has a lot of information that's been fed into it from millions of pages of data and virtually, I can't say the knowledge of human history. That's the goal, is to put virtually all the information related to our experiences and our studies and our knowledge across the planet into the database. So that's the goal, but there's a lot in the database already. So that's the reason there's all this buzz, is that ChatGPT can generate lots of useful information, articles and other things that are substantive and for the most part are right. And even those things that are wrong, it's being improved at a very rapid pace. So we thought it appropriate to submit a question that we knew would be of interest to you and would be consistent with the show. And tell us exactly how the search query into AI was worded, Justin.
So I entered, write an article on the 10 most important reasons to do estate planning.
Now, I think that's a fair topic for us to talk about. And I think it's something that you'd have an interest in. So these are not our 10 things. These are the 10 things that the smartest, can't say person yet. Give us 10 years what we say on smartest person. But right now we can say the smartest thing on the planet, supposedly, gave us this answer. So I'm going to work through this. And these are, I don't have any objections or disagreements with any item on this list. And matter of fact, I think it's a good list. It requires a lot of explanation to be fully useful, meaning it gave us the topics with a brief description, and I could wax on and on about each of these topics, but the topics are fair. It identified these critical themes that I think would be, in many experts' opinion, they would say, okay, I buy this for the top 10 reasons. Incidentally, I'm seeing 12 reasons. How did you word the question?
The top 10 article with the top 10 important reasons to do estate planning. So, one is an introduction.
Okay, that gets us to 11.
In outline form, that's why there's extra.
Okay.
And there's conclusion.
Conclusion, there it is. See, the software is always right, I guess. All right, we'll walk through this, and I'll do this very efficiently because some of these topics, while we talk about them, we'll keep coming back to them because there's so much to be said about them. So there's an introduction of estate planning, but in terms of the reasons, we start with the number one reason, according to ChatGPT, is control over your assets. So there's an explanation of the fact that, and we've talked a little bit about the fact that it's important for you to feel like you have the ability to know that your assets will fund you for the balance of your life, that those will accomplish goals that you have for after your life is ended. You want to be sure that you have control as to how they're used, both in your life and thereafter. You want some level of control, probably. Some of you are pretty laissez-faire about the idea of your children and grandchildren kind of doing what they want. So many of you have a tendency to simply say, here, take it. So you'll have a provision in a will or even a trust to say, I want all my assets to be divided equally between my 3 children, and regardless of the amount, if we're talking about $1 million or $10 million or $100,000, some people just kind of unthinkingly, I would charge, unthinkingly think that that's an opinion that that's a safe thing to do and it's a good thing. Well, it's almost certainly better than leaving them nothing, depending on what they do with it. But I tend to think you can do much better, and we've talked about this on the show. You can do much better. So whenever we've spent all that time talking about this topic, we're really talking about control of your assets. So you, I'm sure, agree with me that that is really among the most important things we can talk about. So I think that this artificial intelligence nailed this one. I think if we're looking at reasons, we all might reorder this some based on our own values, granted, but let's step back and think about, is this an objectively fair list? And I definitely would say yes. I would say a very good list. So control over your assets. Just a couple more words on that topic, then we'll go to number 2. But control of the assets it's done a couple of ways. We mentioned that it's important to have a durable power of attorney so that you appoint somebody who makes decisions for you. That's you are having control. Not having control is when you don't have such a document or you don't have a trust and you become somehow disabled or incapacitated through some traumatic event, and suddenly a court is appointing someone to do this stuff for you. So that's not having control. So control is where you select the person and you create the rules, and those rules can be created by way of a durable power of attorney. They can also be created by way of a durable power of attorney for health care. That's the stuff that's not financial and legal. Those are the things that are strictly related to your health. And then finally, there's a trust where you pick a trustee and you create the rules. The trust is the more structured way for you to have that control. So we'll come back and visit this topic. It's one of the key issues that one of the reasons this show exists is to talk about such things as control over your assets. So that was number 1 on the artificial intelligence software list. What was number 2, according to ChatGPT? Avoiding probate. We talk a lot about that, maybe not actually as much as we should, to be honest with you, because it's not one of my topics that I spend a lot of time with because I don't intend my clients to end up there. Some lawyers who do estate planning, they actually plan for their clients to end up in probate. And I don't want to be critical of that. I can't resist being a little critical because if I'm cynical, I would say that that's where the money is in estate planning. So you look at what you pay for a trust. Well, I mean, it depends where you go. You can pay as little as $1,000. Be suspicious if you're anything below $1,000. You should definitely be suspicious of. You're probably getting a form. So a trust properly done, it's going to be a couple thousand, maybe more, a little more, not a whole lot more. But if those of you who are thinking, oh, that's a lot of money, well, let me tell you about probate. Those of you who don't know how it works, there's a statute that prescribes a percentage that it says that the compensation would be at least that. So the statute, if there's documentation of time by lawyers, a personal representative, and others, if there's documentation, this is the personal representative's fee, incidentally. The personal representative's fee, we'll talk about the lawyer in just a second. Personal representative fee, it depends on how much time they spend, et cetera, but it would be at least those percentages under the statute. And I won't go through those percentages. I think they top out at 4 or 5%. But you do the math. If you have a significant estate, significant in today's inflated terms, you're way above the amount of money that I just suggested to you could possibly spend doing a trust. So, as a matter of fact, you can easily be 20, 30, 40,000. It just depends on the size of your estate. So you can go to the statute in Missouri. I think it's chapter 474 and you can, if you want to, type in a search under Missouri statutes, fees, estate planning fees, or personal representative compensation. That's probably the best phrase to use, personal representative compensation. So you can read that and do the math. So the bottom line is probate is very profitable for the personal representative. Now, the personal representative doesn't have to be the lawyer. I mean, believe it or not, you can actually have the personal representative peeling away the amount that's under the statute, which can be above this percentage. Remember, the percentage is the minimum. So if they can document more time, they can claim more time. But in addition to that, maybe a lawyer. So if the personal representative is your nephew or a friend or whoever it might be, in addition to that, there would be a lawyer probably. That lawyer's going to be paid. So sometimes the personal representative is the lawyer, and then they will use a lawyer, could be their law firm, but they'll use a lawyer, and they get paid. So I'm not saying that lawyers who do this don't earn their money. I mean, it is a lot of work. When you do probate, it's not a simple thing. It's complex. It's a specialty area. So it's not your average lawyer that's going to do a good job with that. They need to focus on it, just like a lot of things in the law. A divorce law, you don't want just a general practitioner to handle a divorce if it's your son or daughter and there's any assets at all to speak of, not to mention children. So you want somebody who does this all the time, right? So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the lawyers, I don't want to offend the legal world that actually does work in this area, because I know it's complicated. Tucker Allen does it. So, but I'm just telling you that Tucker Allen would rather you do planning in terms of doing a trust, have a durable power of attorney, have in place those documents that allow you to avoid the probate costs. But ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, which may be better than simply human intelligence, not now, but in the not too distant future. Would you bet on that, Justin?
Most definitely.
Yeah, and matter of fact, that's the concern, right? That's where all the fear is that
simultaneously afraid and hopeful at the same time.
Yeah. As long as we can control that intelligence, then our lives get better. So according to this software, which I agree with, the second best reason probably is avoiding probate. It's just a big chunk out of many people's estates. So talk to a lawyer who's going to give it to you straight, who'll explain to you about the costs and the delay. Let's not forget that. Avoiding probate's not just money. It's going to be a year out of your life, probably, and it often invites conflict because it invites people to challenge wills and invites perhaps claimants that wouldn't have come out of the woodwork without the publicity associated with probate. Now, don't get me wrong. You can have somebody challenge a trust. You can have somebody challenge lots of things. So it's not that they're challenge-proof. It's that what is most likely to generate and what historically has generated more litigation. So if you ask that question, it's clear what the answer to that is. And it's understandable. Probate is a very public thing. There's nothing private about probate. The assets are disclosed and advertisements are run for claimants, for beneficiaries, creditors, et cetera. So by the time all the dust settles and the time passes and the money's spent, maybe then the assets are left that can be distributed. So again, we have here number 2 on this list, that is not my list, is avoiding probate. Number 3, protecting your beneficiaries. I'm glad it chose that one because I didn't think, Justin, that would be that high on the list. It's high on my list, and people who watch this show know that I talk about this a lot. I think one of the coolest things that you can do is to protect assets, and you can do it by proper trust planning. You can call it estate planning, meaning that you can create trusts that do the same thing for your children, and that's most clients' primary interest, because by the time they're 70 or 80 and they're doing this planning, often they're less concerned about protecting their own estate personally from people that might sue them or all the risks that we have, divorce, other things that happen, personal injury lawsuits, bankruptcies, et cetera. Often they're less concerned about that for themselves, so they want to build those protections into their plan for their children or their their grandchildren. So in that sense, protecting assets is really, really cool feature of planning. It's much better than simply dumping the assets in the hands of or lap of your children when you pass away. You can do much better than that. And to not take advantage of that when the cost of doing that in estate planning may not be anything more than if you're going to do estate planning, it might be the cost the same. Maybe it will add a little bit of cost depending on whatever how you're choosing to do it. But the bottom line is huge opportunity that's available, a gift, a tremendous gift that you can give the people you love and care about that they can't give themselves. They can't create that level of protection for themselves. As you've heard me talk about on this show more than once, I don't tire of saying this because I think it's so huge. So I'm glad to see that my opinion is vindicated by ChatGPT. So protecting your beneficiaries, minimizing taxes. Now, that wouldn't make it this high on some of your lists because now it depends on what taxes we're talking about. If we're talking about the taxes associated with deferred assets where you have 401ks, IRAs, that sort of thing, then yeah, that's a relevant discussion, is planning those in such a way that you can get the greatest postponement possible for having to pay those taxes when you receive it. But the opportunity there has been diminished by recent legislation. But if you're talking about estate taxes, then we're still at an exemption level for husband and wife of about 21 to 22 million. So 11 something, almost 12 million bucks per person. So that may go away. It may be changed, in which case suddenly estate taxes are a huge issue. Everybody's worried about it. We were, and not so long ago, many of you remember that there was a time, I think in 2000, when the estate tax exemption was $1 million. $1 million. So that even then, that was not that big a number, and it was a number that a lot of people suddenly realized that these very steep rates of taxes that apply for estates, and they do. They appreciate or they rise very rapidly. So you find yourself at 40+% almost as a flat tax in the estate tax. So in order to avoid that, what you would do is you would make gifts during your lifetime. You can create trusts that are irrevocable trusts that allow you to avoid it. You can give things away. You can make charitable contributions. There are various techniques that are all about just tax avoidance. That's the whole purpose of the estate planning is driven almost entirely by tax considerations. If you have $100 million, $200 million, et cetera, this whole conversation may be largely about tax considerations, meaning when you go to an estate planning lawyer, you're going to choose somebody who focuses on tax issues. They're almost a tax lawyer, quite frankly. Sometimes those lawyers do general tax law as well as estate planning because their estate planning is dominated by tax considerations. That's not the focus, for example, of Tucker Allen. Tucker Allen, sure, we have clients who have estates that are sufficiently large to where that becomes an issue, and we do the tax planning. But most of our clients, our core clients, it's all these other issues that are more critical to them, that are more important to them than the tax issues. But it's on here. So according to ChatGPT, we're at what number? That was number 4?
That was number 4, correct.
So now we're on number 5, providing for minor children. I won't spend time on this. I don't think it's an issue for many of you, but it's obvious that if you have minor children, you've got to do planning. If you don't, you're really leaving them to the whims of a social system, of a judicial system that can do lots of things that you may not approve of. So everything that you can do in terms of identifying who you would want to be a guardian or who you would want to your children to be placed in the care of, how you'd want money to be managed. There are countless reasons to think about, to consider whenever you're doing your estate planning and you have minor children. So we won't spend any further time on that. So 6, providing for family members with special needs. Similar thing, if you create the right estate planning, your children can still get federal benefits, all those wonderful, wonderful benefits that are available to people who are disabled or have special needs. I mean, they're great programs. The problem is virtually across the board in those programs, you're disqualified if you have any significant assets. So as a practical matter, you have to be broke to qualify for these tremendous programs that cost far more money than even reasonably wealthy people could provide for their loved ones. So on the one hand, you have this beautiful fruit hanging on the tree that offers so many wonderful benefits to your loved ones, but you can't have it because you have assets. So those assets have to be drained first. They have to be spent, and I would argue wasted, because you're only doing that because you're required to before you can have this fruit. A much better way is to create trusts, special need trusts, for example, in which immediately you can have assets that still do not forbid you to qualify for all these federal and state programs. And at the same time, this money in certain ways can be made available to your loved ones. So estate planning, obviously, and ChatGPT is correct here, for people for whom it's relevant, you have somebody who has a special need, it's huge. It's huge. It's not a good idea. It's a critical idea. It's essential that you do estate planning if you have somebody with special needs and there are any assets at all. And there virtually are assets. And so why just throw that money away when it could be used also for your loved one or for other loved ones? So anyway, providing for minor children, doing family members with special needs. Next item is ensuring business continuity. This will have application to a lot of you. And sometimes I forget this. I should realize that I'm kind of an entrepreneur, and I should realize that probably many of you have had careers in which you are self-employed in some fashion. And some of you, it has amounted to a business, meaning it's something that has, it's an ongoing concern that has the capability of existing without you. So you can sell it or you can transfer it. But the point is, you have to take steps to assure its survival if it's going to survive. And for those of you who are getting older, business succession, it's sometimes called. I like the phrase here that was used by ChatGPT. Its wording was ensuring business continuity. I really like that much better than business succession. So business continuity, that requires some thought. If this business is a source of income to your loved ones, maybe you intend for it to be a source of income for generations to come. Maybe you intend for the business to be passed to someone else. You want to have it in a position to sell it, which also means that it has to stay healthy for a period of time that you are not sure whether you'll be capable of playing the role that you've played. So there's lots of issues with planning with that. And part of estate planning, a good estate planner understands, these business concerns, and they bring an eye to the table that just a lawyer simply in their bubble as a lawyer cannot fully appreciate. But I'm glad it's on this list, because if those of you who are watching this who have a business or there's a family business that you're concerned about, this is a huge issue for you. For you, it's like that counterpart for special needs. For people who fall in that category, it's the front of the line in terms of their thoughts and concerns about estate planning. And if you have a business in the family business, then this is something that will probably be the center of your discussions with your lawyers when you do your estate planning. But yeah, with planning, there's a chance that your business survives. Whereas with no planning, there's arguably no chance your business survives, or certainly you leave it to the winds, and that's just not responsible. It's not the sort of stewardship that I know you want to have for those people that you care about. So we go from business continuity. This is number 8, I guess. Protecting family harmony. Boy, how much time do we give that, Justin? I'll go ahead and jump to the conclusion that those of you watching this probably are familiar with circumstances in which there has been disharmony in families relating to estate planning. I want to jump to that conclusion. And there's something about this subject, I don't know why it is, but there's something about it where people respond often badly after a loved one has passed away, or even in the final stages of the loved one's life. I don't know. I know this isn't always true. I know that some of you in your own families have had circumstances where a loved one has passed away. There's been harmony, mutual support, generosity among all of you with each other. It happens, no doubt about it. but I'm just here to tell you, if you don't know, that that is a minority of cases. Clearly, the majority of cases, we can argue about how high that majority is, but it's a majority of cases in my experience. There is not that level of generosity, and there does tend to be conflict, and it doesn't necessarily hinge upon the magnitude of the estate. That's the reason I think that this is not simply a matter of greed. Somebody might say that. Many people do say that. They say, oh, the reason you have family disharmony, conflict in estate-related issues is that it's simply human greed. I think it's deeper than that. I think greed is a component, but I also think that it's people who resent maybe somebody getting a disproportionate share when they feel that that person did not care for their mother or father the way that child had. There's some of that. There's some of resentment boiling over that's existed a long time toward maybe a stepmother, stepfather, sibling. I mean, there are lots of possibilities here. But I'm just suggesting that it's a too superficial a read to simply say that what we observe is human selfishness at work. Now, I can agree that what the human emotions at work are not flattering in this case, on this subject. I would agree that whatever they are not flattering, but I wouldn't say that is simply greed. I think there's more at work. But here's the point, and ChatGPT, again, I get it. It makes it on its top 10 list, protecting family harmony. Doesn't this impress you all a little bit? I mean, that this software is already at this stage. You've probably been hearing about its capabilities, but this is not an obvious point, protecting family harmony. It's one could even argue it's a little bit of a subtle point. But I can tell you this, for some families, this is the point. I've done estate planning where I'm looking at this patriarch and matriarch, meaning these people who sit at the top of the family tree, and they're older and they've had some level of control over the family, and yet they know that lurking, beneath the surface are these forces that might become unleashed when they pass away, and they're concerned whether there will be conflict and whether there will be relationships destroyed, not to mention litigation, et cetera. So they're trying to think through this question about how to protect family harmony. And there are several ways to answer that. And the purpose of today is to not so much spend a lot of time with these issues, but to call your attention to these issues because it's a good list. And then some of these issues, I'd argue all these issues are things we've raised before. And I would argue furthermore that these are all issues that we'll come to again. But these are all things that when I bring them up to you, it allows you to think about them as a headline matter, and then we'll circle around to tell you more about it. Perhaps you'll independently explore each of these issues. I'll say a couple things before I leave this topic, though, of protecting family harmony, is that we know that there are some tried and true methods that help. Among them is a meeting in which this proposed estate plan is introduced to them in advance. This isn't always a good idea, but it's usually a good idea. And that's where you sit down, probably not at Thanksgiving. It's probably not a good time because often family gets together at Thanksgiving, and some people, I've had it happen where a client would think it's a good idea to raise this topic. At least do it after dinner, because sometimes it'll spoil the rest of the weekend. But I'm serious that to have this meeting that everybody dreads, and as a result, many do not even do because of that dread. It's critical to have the meeting, and it's not fun. It's something that you need to do, but you do it it's done in a way where your lawyer may be there, maybe your lawyer's not there. Again, it is very fact-based, very circumstance-based. But, you explain to them, this is my plan. I want you to know why I'm doing this. Your goal is not to have everybody at that table to conclude that this was a good idea. I don't think that's probably going to happen. If it does happen, you're a heck of a salesman. But I think what's more likely is that the best, what you realistically hope for, and I think can reasonably expect, is that at least no one will choose to launch an ugly battle alleging that there was coercion or there was duress or undue influence, those sorts of allegations, or that you didn't mean what happened. It was a mistake. It was a drafting error. I mean, that sort of thing. You kind of eliminate that unless they believe that you're under somebody's control at that point and you continue to be under that person's control for the next 2 years. Assuming, I'm giving an example, that maybe you die 2 years later, maybe you die 5 years later. Now, if you die the next month, then yeah, you still reduce the chance of that allegation, but the allegation has a little more potential viability as a claim if you die shortly thereafter, because it's not inconsistent with somebody having that sort of short-term influence on you. But it becomes less likely if you're talking about a substantial period of time. So again, I would suggest this not be a deathbed sort of meeting, but I would argue the deathbed meeting is probably better than no meeting. So this is just one example. There are lots of things you can do. You can build in checks and balances. You can have a provision that if somebody brings an action, that they're disqualified from receiving any sort of inheritance. So it's not uncommon to have those provisions. Now, those are strictly enforced. Those provisions courts don't really like, but they are enforced as long as your attorney properly drafts them. Another reason to have somebody who practices in this area exclusively is that they will know how to draft this language so that you can have those sorts of, I'll use the phrase, penalty clauses that will hold up. And they do hold up if they're properly drafted. But because you know judges don't like them, because they punish somebody for challenging the will, essentially, and the whole idea is to incentivize people to not challenge it. But courts don't like it because they think that it may, in fact, dissuade people who have legitimate claims from bringing them for fear that they're going to get punished, written out of the will, lose the inheritance that they have already. So those are reasons that you have to draft it in such a way that the court is likely to enforce it, will enforce it. So this means somebody who's experienced this area. So Tucker Allen, as I've mentioned to you before, Tucker Allen, this is what they do, at least the St. Louis or rather the Missouri area as well as Illinois. So protecting family harmony, a huge, huge point. Peace of mind, I won't dwell on that long. Again, it's a little bit of a subtle point. Some people would leave it unmentioned. I'm not so concrete in my thinking. Some people say of accountants, I am a CPA, some of you know that. Some people say, well, CPAs don't appreciate, the subtle human dimensions of planning and finances, et cetera. But I do appreciate them. I get them. I get that money is ultimately driven by issues related to satisfaction and happiness, peace, harmony, et cetera. So I know that whenever you talk about reasons you should plan, it's a mistake to not mention things like peace of mind. This probably wouldn't have been on my list, I'll tell you. Not because I disagree with it. I wouldn't have given it perhaps this level of priority, but also I probably wouldn't have thought about it. But I get it. Peace of mind for some of you, the moment you sign those documents, it's like, okay, now I don't have anything else that I worry about the rest of my life is not really important. I've done the only thing that I really had to worry about, and that's done. So whatever happens now, I'm ready for it. There are people who it just takes this weight off their shoulders. So I won't minimize this one being on this list. It is intangible. Some of you would say, well, I would have on my list something more concrete there, safety, physical safety or other things. But peace of mind is on this list, just so you know. So artificial intelligence said that's hugely important. I can tell you that probably accounts for 30% of any estate planning lawyer's business. I'm just guessing. Meaning that while the items that on the surface would drive their being there would be concrete items, things related to decision-making in the event that they become incompetent, things about tax concerns, things about asset protection. Those are the tangible things. But I would argue that the tangible things often hover above what may be more at root, more the impetus for the meeting. And I think often at root, intangibles such as peace of mind is really driving what on the surface are more tangible issues. So peace of mind, number 9. What is our number 10? According to ChatGPT, this is interesting. I hadn't actually looked too much at this one, Justin. I was focusing on the others. Number 10 is adaptability, which is an explanation of how estate planning allows for flexibility and adaptability as circumstances and wishes change over time. Good point. Good point. Wouldn't have made my list, but again, it doesn't mean I disagree with it. I would have, if somebody presented it to me and I thought about it, it may have made my list. But adaptability is just, as I said, as I read there from the language that was generated by ChatGPT, you can do your estate planning so that you can accommodate, you can leave room for lots of change. You want to do it that way. Those of you who tend to change your state of residence, for example, if you plan correctly, that's no problem. Whatever somebody may tell you. Often I see ads in Florida saying, oh, if you haven't done Florida estate planning, you need to do that now. Well, that's not technically true. If your estate planning was done correctly, virtually all states recognize the laws of other states, and they will interpret a will from another state according to that other state's laws, not Florida's laws, the other state's laws. And unless there's some fundamental conflict with public policy, states will use the law that governed the instrument where it was drafted, at least in estate planning, and in many other areas, actually. So it's called choice of laws or governing law issues. This is a whole body of teaching in law school and among practitioners, too. Sometimes it can become very complex. What is the governing law? And often in contracts and stuff, you have a choice of law. So the idea that one state would apply the law of another state to some people seems crazy, and they assume, oh, well, if you planned according to Missouri, oh my gosh, you die in Florida, that means Florida's going to use its own laws, and they're going to ignore what would have happened in Missouri. That's not true. Now, it doesn't mean that there's nothing that you could do in another state. I would argue that you don't have to do it if there's proper planning in another state. And I will say that, for example, though, you should be aware of this. If you own real estate in another state, and this is true if you never leave the state of Missouri. If you're in the state of Missouri and you own real estate in another state and it goes through probate, now this is not the people who are doing trusts, but if it goes through probate, then, yeah, there will have to be an ancillary action, is what it's called, an ancillary action opened in that other state. Not a big deal. It costs money, but it just has to be done because real estate's different. When there's real estate in another state, that state's got to issue its order about the title of the real estate. So I'm not being dismissive about it because it does mean you have to spend some money. But does it mean that your estate planning crashes because you have real estate in another state? No. So I don't want you who've done estate planning to believe that anytime you're in another state and potentially pass away in another state, that suddenly your estate planning is gone terribly sideways. If it's done correctly, you're fine. If your estate planning is done correctly, you're fine. So on the subject of adaptability, your estate planning should be done in such a way to accommodate changes to easily accommodate a change in a beneficiary, for example, a change in a trustee. That happens. If you have a trust, remember, I'm an advocate of a trust, not to run it through your estate, not to run it through probate. If you've done that correctly, then yeah, you may have to replace a trustee at some point. No big deal. Simple. That sort of adaptability is easily built into your estate planning. It may cost you nothing, depending on how you do it. But even if it does cost you something, we're talking about dollars here. We're not talking about $1,000 here. So sometimes you'll change beneficiaries. If it's a simple change of a name, that shouldn't cost you. In some cases, it should cost you nothing. In other cases, if your lawyer has to spend some time with it, maybe it's a half hour, maybe it's an hour. My point is, proper estate planning is adaptable. It's not fragile. If there's fragility in your plan, there's something wrong with your plan. life is not like that. So things that are easily broken, that are fragile, then that's going to cost you a whole lot of money in estate planning, because I assure you there's going to be waves during the balance of your life, and you're going to be tossed to and fro a little bit. That's the thing called life. And if estate planning cannot accommodate that sort of change, then you need another estate planner, because adaptability is one of the huge advantages of estate planning. It lets you go about your life in a way that you can know through all of that to and fro, up and down. You can know that, yeah, you're covered. All the bases are secure. Your family's secure. The balance of your life is secure. That's going back to item number 9, the peace of mind that is promised by good estate planning. I think I give ChatGPT an A on this, don't you think?
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I think that it did a good job here. Tell me, let me know what you all think. Aren't you all impressed with this? I mean, this is what an experienced lawyer would probably come up with. Even lawyers who disagree about whether these would be their top 10, we all would agree they're good ideas and they're valid. Oh, there's one thing I forgot to mention. Please hit that subscription button. It's huge to us. I have to tell you, I've told you before that we don't make money from this. Tucker Allen, has its own source of clients, and we just do this because we love it, and this is a labor of love. So if we looked for ways to make money, it wouldn't be by way of this show. So we need some encouragement that you all benefit from it, that you like it. And the only way we know that, I'm looking at a camera right now. The only way that we know that is if you subscribe. So simply visiting it, liking it is good. So like us, please. But there's nothing like a subscription. It tells us that, oh, we see this as an ongoing benefit. So this is not that this particular thing was helpful to me, which is, less inspiring to us, but it's to say that this project that you have going here is really beneficial to us. So please subscribe and let us know your thoughts. Tell us how we can improve this show. I mean, we're here for you. And if we could do something different or do it better, tell us. I mean, we're listening. We're all ears. So I hope this has been beneficial to you. This has been another episode of Life's Third Act. Till next time, take care.
You've been listening to Life's Third Act, a podcast for thriving in retirement. Sponsored by Tucker Allen, your estate and elder law advisors. Each week, we discuss topics and answer questions to help you better plan for your future. For more information, visit tuckerallen.com. Subscribe and listen again next week for another edition of Life's Third Act. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements.